And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 93. Conor, we're done. No more players. No more Bruins have ever been anything higher than number 92. So we are done with players. There's
no label. It's just the 93rd episode, Evan.
Just boring old 93. Nothing. Someone's got to come through who's going to be 93. We got to have players over the next couple of years occupy those numbers, except actually not really a couple of years because then we're done with those. So then it's out of the question. We're going to be like episode 193. Oh, so-and-so was 93. We can do him as the episode. But I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. And what's really fun is there's only 2 games left in the regular season. The playoffs are almost here. You can taste it. And the first big playoff news that has come about is the Vegas Golden Knights done. And everybody hates them. And I think that's a very interesting development because if you remember when they came into the league and they were succeeding, everybody was pumped. Like they were everyone's second favorite team. Everybody's rooting for them. And somewhere over the last 3 years, and there's a few things we can point to, Fleury and kind of getting everybody and the Twitter account, everybody just started hating them. And now they completely imploded. The Eichel trade is kind of blown up in their face. It reminds me of the Matt Duchene deal with Ottawa. And they will not be participating in playoff hockey this year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that kind of hurts my season prediction at the start of the year when I said the Bruins were gonna. I got some of it right, and then I said Eichel was going to Vegas. However, I said that they were going to beat Boston in the Stanley Cup final. Alas, it did not happen. But yeah, no one really likes them, and I think for fans, it probably has to do with the fact that the Twitter is unbearable, and I imagine for the players, which. Was it, I think, San Jose they were talking about? I think it was Meyer was saying after the game, yeah, I got a bunch of texts from other guys in the league, please beat these guys. Which, what do you know when, your GM and your franchise treats actual players, real, human beings as be a GM mode and treats them like trash and throws them to the side? Kind of catches up to you. And I don't know about you, Evan. I'm not maybe a hockey genius. I'm not a franchise builder here, but I feel like when you have the reigning Vezina winner, you probably shouldn't trade him.
Yeah, especially lifelong
player
like that.
Yeah. Could have used him.
Poor Logan Thompson though in net. I mean, that kid was playing his ass off, and he kept getting them to shootouts, and then he would never score in the shootout. And the poor guy's like, if I let one goal in, this game's over. You saw it in the Dallas game. And then you saw it on Wednesday night when they played. Who did Vegas play last night? Why am I blanking? I watched the game.
Yeah,
and I'm blanking on this. It's irrelevant at this point. Oh, they played Chicago. Chicago. Anyways, so they're done. Vegas is out. I forget who my cup final or how far I had the Bruins going at the beginning of the year. I don't think I had them in the cup final.
You had them losing to Tampa, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I think I said they'd lose to Tampa, which could maybe happen at some point. But when it comes to the playoffs for the Bruins, not Vegas, but for the Bruins, Carolina looks like probably the first round matchup. There's one possible way it could end up being Toronto, but a lot of things kind of have to go right. They have
you'd have to win
next
two,
and
Tampa would have to lose there too.
So once Tampa wins one of these 2 games, it's officially Carolina. So we can talk about Carolina Bruins as the first round and pretty comfortably say that's going to be the first round matchup. What's your initial reaction to this?
It's definitely going to be tough, but I think from what we've talked about before, right? Whoever they were going to draw, there's going to be a daunting matchup for the Bruins. So if you want to look at, I think Bruins fans, they look at this matchup. The first thing you're going to look at, obviously, is the fact that you lost 3 games in a row to this team in the regular season. You got outscored 16-1. That being said, is that going to transit over to the playoffs? I'd imagine not. I think it's going to be a 6-7 game series. It's going to be really tough. They're, the Metro Division champions for a reason. They play pretty stingy defense. It's more for them. It's good offense. It's great defense. So half the time you're, trying to gather yourself in your own zone. They're forechecking hard. They're creating turnovers, capitalizing. They're in your face, which they've been for years now. But and they've got capable goaltending, at least for right now, which I'm sure we're going to talk about shortly in terms of Freddie Anderson and his availability. But for the Bruins, they've already, Bruce Cassidy's talked about the fact that They've already started looking at some Carolina film. Again, we don't know yet. I'm sure by the time this podcast drops, they very well could be locked into that matchup. But if you're the Bruins, I don't think they're fretting about it in terms of looking at that regular season as an omen. You look at the Bruins, I think it was in 08-09, that wagon of a team. They beat Carolina 3 games in a row. I think they outscored them like 14-4. And then what happened in the playoffs, right? It's a completely clean slate.
Scott Walker.
Yes, exactly. We don't talk about that series, but that's one of those ones where it's an example that it is a completely clean slate. You look at the Carolina, how they were rolling in 2019, and the Bruins kind of knocked them around. Same thing up in the Toronto bubble, where they seemed like an even better team, and the Bruins kind of outmuscled them in that series up in the bubble as well. So going to be very tight. It's going to be a lot of the Bruins making adjustments, because even with some of the issues with Carolina in terms of injuries and what have you, the way they play is still a tough matchup just on paper in terms of how they execute out there. So for the Bruins, it's going to be a lot of accountability in their own zone, making clean passes. A guy like Lindholm will help a great deal with that, but still, it's a team where you are careless with the puck. You are taking too long to move the puck out of your zone. They're going to take advantage of it, and they can bury you in a hurry. So it's going to be quite the series. I think it's going to, go pretty far into this few weeks of May.
Yeah, I don't think we want to make predictions now because it hasn't happened yet. So we're not gonna. I just, as you said, I think the series goes deep. I think the Bruins, though, as much as the Hurricanes have, I think the Bruins can match it. I don't look at the Bruins and say, oh, this is going to be a clean sweep for Carolina. I also don't think there was really a good series for the Bruins. Like, there was no series I looked at and said, well, that's an easy one for the Bruins. You got to aim for like playing, that team.
Yeah.
So there's no good one. And you mentioned the goaltending with Carolina. Freddie Anderson is supposed to be out for the first couple games of the playoffs, correct?
It seemed like it's still up in the air. At first, it seemed like he was going to be good to go for the start of it. Now I think the general consensus is he'll be back at some point, but maybe not the first couple of games of the series.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's a chance for the Bruins to really kind of establish dominance and kind of get a grasp on the series. Now, Antti Ranta would probably be a net for them during that time. I wonder if they can take advantage of that, if they can make those first 3 games. I know we're kind of diving into preview stuff, which we'll do as it gets closer, probably next week. But I'm curious if they can kind of use that to get a real leg up in the series to where, and I'm wondering if even if Freddie Anderson comes back, is he gonna be the same guy?
Yeah.
Like it's a real question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something. And you look at the narrative on Freddie Anderson, I think is just changed in a couple of months too. Because I think when the Carolina added him to the roster, Bruins fans were like, all right, we smoked Peter Mrazek like in the playoffs before. Like they've had Freddie Anderson's number throughout many first round matchups when he was with Toronto. You look at now, though, 3 games against the Bruins this season, Freddie Anderson has 2 shutouts and a .990 save percentage. Pretty good. And he's been legit. Shocking what happens when you put a guy like him on a team with an actual stout defense, great structure, and a really good coach. But shocking how that happens. But wow. But you look also at just Carolina, how they play, though, that it's not like you lose Freddie Anderson and all of a sudden I think they're going to be letting up 5 goals a game, like whether it's Ranta or it's this the kid they just added, Pyotr Kochetov, I think. I butchered his name, but he's Russian. But had really good numbers in the AHL, and I think Carolina's 5-0-0. I think since Anderson's gone down, and a lot of it has been, I don't think this guy's bailing them out by any means. They're winning these games. You look at the shot totals, and it's like 39-19. They're like shutting teams down, which is what they do. When you have the structure they have, their ability to keep you in your own zone, guys like Jacob Slavin, they can play that kind of game, right? So, but in terms of just the pure mismatch of it, yeah, you make a good point that if you're the Bruins, I think you have to be not optimistic, opportunistic. Can't talk. I'm already running out of fume.
I thought you were going to say optitude. And I was like,
yes. Optimistic or opportunistic, rather, that you can land some punches early on in the series because whether it's this rookie goalie or Ranta, it's a chance for you to, I think, maybe cause some pressure and create some frantic, decision making from the Hurricanes, right? Because they can go into this series probably knowing they have a good structure and they can give Freddie Anderson some time to recuperate. If you go into game 1 down in Raleigh and you score 5 goals on these guys, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Freddie, how you doing? Like, are you gonna, that creates that level of panic where I think kind of the plan they have mapped out where they should be able to overcome a few games without him. All of a sudden the wheels start turning and they start, pushing him back too soon. And as you said, Evan, like he could come back and he's still not the same player. When you have an injury like that, look at Tuukka Rask with the Islanders series, right? Where they kind of pushed him back and said it was good to go. I don't know, that decisive game didn't look that great, right?
No.
Like, that's a risk that you run in that situation as well. So I think that's going to be the key is these first few games. Obviously, first games, you set the tone, you try to build that momentum. But if you're able to do some damage against the rest of this goalie depth chart while Anderson's on the shelf, that could, swing that momentum back in your way and have Carolina going down the rabbit hole again of here we go again with this team. We have to rely on Anderson to bail us out when who knows what state he's going to be in if he's ready to go in, say, game 3 or 4.
Obviously, we like to make fun of Toronto a lot, but I feel like we don't talk enough. And it's maybe because Carolina just does things better than the Maple Leafs, but we don't talk enough about the fact that, the Bruins have also dominated the Hurricanes in the postseason in the past bunch of years. Like it's not just the Maple Leafs. Like the Hurricanes, they've also beat twice. And up in the bubble, I know it was a sweep in 2019 in the conference final, but in the bubble, was it 5 games?
I think it was 5 games, wasn't it?
They won one. Carolina won one, and then that was that.
They won in double overtime that one game. They had the game they came down 2 goals in the third period to win. So yes. I think it was 5 games.
Because that was the series where game 1 was at like 11 a.m. after the
and it was the Bergeron double OT win.
Yep. Right. So that was that series. So again, I think Carolina strikes me as a team that's been there enough now that they're on the doorstep of like actually going deep and having real success. So that's kind of my biggest worry with this series with the Bruins. But that's something we can kind of touch on maybe later as it gets closer with the previews and all that stuff. I think the one of the biggest things about this series is it's way better to go through the Metro than it is to go through the Atlantic, because now in the Atlantic, you set up a scenario where the Maple Leafs and the Lightning can kick the hell out of each other. And the Panthers can get knocked around by the Capitals for a full series, or potentially the Penguins are probably going to be the Capitals. And you kind of avoid that. Like that's not too terrible. I mean, as much as I wanted them to play the Maple Leafs for like fun and for the teams, strategically, it's better to let the Atlantic teams beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I look at it. I think we've made that analogy before where it's going to be a tough road anyway, but it's kind of similar to the Celtics going into this playoff series against the Nets, where it's like, all right, they could very well lose in round 1. Like the team they're going against should be good. And like Carolina is good. So this Bruins team could lose in the first round and people can be very disappointed in that, or they could get past them and all of a sudden the road opens up a little bit. Granted, that means round 2, you're going up against either Pittsburgh or the Rangers, who I wrote last weekend that I think the Rangers are probably the best matchup for the Bruins just because they're relatively pedestrian at even strength play. That being said, they have Shesterkin, who could win a series by himself. So whichever way you look at it, it's going to be tough. But as you said, if you get past Carolina, you play against teams like New York or Pittsburgh. And as you said, on the other side of the bracket, you have these teams kicking the crap out of each other. You get out of round 1, at the very least, one of Tampa or Toronto is going to be out of the picture. Most likely the team that advances is probably going to be banged up. It's probably going to be a long series. And as you said, I imagine Florida probably gets past the Capitals, especially if Ovechkin's hurt. But as is usually the case when you play against the Capitals in the series, you're probably not coming out unscathed.
No.
So if you're, and then who knows if that's the case where you're playing the Rangers or the Penguins in round 2, and then it's Panthers against Tampa or it's Panthers against Toronto. If you get all the way to the conference final and that's your kind of key matchup and it's Toronto, Florida, Tampa Bay. 1, I think Bruins fans will be more than happy of a showdown in the conference final. It means you had a pretty good run in and of itself. And 2, who knows what the state of the team is by then. I mean, you make the same argument for the Bruins that they're going to be banged up at that point, going up against Carolina and New York, going up against Ryan Reeves and those guys. But have to imagine the other team's also going to be pretty banged up at that point as well. So again, no easy, clear path. It's not even like a situation in 2018-19 where the path opened up because teams that no one expected were, behemoths at that point with Carolina and Columbus and what have you. there's no easy outs in the bracket this year. But that being said, if you wanted to find the better way to kind of navigate through it, I think it has to be through the Metro.
Oh, 100%. Again, I mean, the Bruins have kind of got the short end of the stick in the past couple of seasons where they've had to go through a tough road on their side, on the Atlantic side. And now you're like, all right, you know what? Get the Metro. You know, you've earned the right to get the, I guess, a little bit easier of a chance, or not as tough. And also, you know, the NHL is going to be hoping so much for a Tampa Bay, Florida second round so they can tout the Battle of Florida. That'll be great.
If you're looking for like actual dream scenarios for the NHL, it's probably Boston, you know, the way that it's shaping up now, like Tampa and Toronto, and then round 2, Boston, New York, and the Battle of Florida, and then conference final. Or it wouldn't be Battle of Florida, but let's say it's Toronto advances. Boston, Toronto in a conference final would be the dream. Oh, Gary Bettman would be deceased. It'd be unreal.
Gary, no, it's not Gary Bettman. It's Gary Batman.
Gary Batman. Sorry. Yes.
As always with series, we like to kind of hint on some X factors, and maybe we'll pick official ones because we're going to go over a few. We'll pick official ones when we do kind of our predictions and preview and all that stuff next week. But what do you look at right now and say that's the X factor for the Bruins in this series? This is what's going to get them past the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in play. We've already talked about the goaltending, which will be obvious in terms of what Carolina especially gets, but you can make the same argument for Swayman and Olmark, and you don't know how that translates over to the playoffs. It could be they struggle with it, or who knows, one of them goes unconscious and goes on a run. But I think for me, one matchup that I'm very curious to see is going to be Hampus Lindholm and just what he brings to this team. Because I think the number one, foundation of how the Bruins can even this series and avoid those situations where they get into these track meets or you know, spending time in their own zone has to be on the breakout and making clean passes. And I think we've seen, even though Lindholm has played 10, 11 total games with Boston, you see the difference that he makes in terms of his impact away from the offensive zone, away from just eating up minutes. It's his ability to break the puck out, to get guys moving. And you need that because Carolina has 4 lines that all play the same way in terms of they can swarm the puck carrier, can create turnovers, create havoc, and all of a sudden loose puck, they've got a guy in front in the slot who's ready to bury it. We saw that countless times in the past. We saw it quite a bit this year when you lose 7-1, 6-0, what they can do in that situation. So I think Lindholm, in terms of just one player, is someone that I think really needs to be on his game because you need to get that puck out quick, or else Carolina's again, they're going to swarm you and they're going to create turnovers.
That is an understatement. That's a very good X factor. I agree. I think my X factor, you mentioned the forward depth of the Hurricanes. My X factor is more the offensive depth of the Bruins. That's what's got you here. Like that's what has fueled you during this season. Was Sweeney went out, made signings to bolster the depth. You know, Haula obviously has worked out terrific. I think we'll talk about Haula in a few minutes for something completely different. But Nosek and I mean, Foligno obviously has had his issues, but you know, you've had some real depth signings throughout this lineup and it's starting to work. So again, if you are going to match up against the Hurricanes and actually beat them, it's not just their first line or their second line. It's, you know, Nino Niederreiter and Derek Stepan on the third line and Jesperi Kotkaniemi on the fourth. And like, you have to actually be able to match that. Now, I think the Bruins can. I do think the Bruins can, but they've also got to be able to score. You have to, that Coyle line has to be a talent mismatch thing. You know, your fourth line has to be a little bit more of a shutdown line. It's gonna be interesting to see if Cassidy kind of uses that fourth line as a permanent shutdown line, because it doesn't feel like the Hurricanes have any one line that like you have to shut down. You kind of have to keep an eye on all of them, but none are overpowering. None are like, you know, Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak. But I do think you have a lot here that you can expose, but it's not going to be easy. So I think their X factor is going to be, you know, your own depth offensively. Another X factor I think it's going to be interesting is how your defense are after the Lindholm McAvoy pairing. What is Grzelcyk and Carlo going to give you? How much is Grzelcyk going to play with McAvoy? How much is Lindholm going to play with Carlo? What's your third pairing? Like, how's Derek Forbort? I mean, he's been definitely a little more solid the past month or so. Who's going to be next to him? You know, is Clifton going to work there? I think you have a lot of question marks down there. And a lot of teams have question marks down there, but I don't think it's easy when you do too. So that's going to be something we're going to have to watch Do you have any other X factors? Any other big things?
I would say another one is probably just that power play. And again, that was going.
Forgot about the power play.
When it's going into Thursday's game, over 36, I think.
Ooh, very good.
Not great. And again, even if this power play, I think, was humming along as we kind of expected, they'd still have some pretty tough sledding because Carolina, I think, has the top PK unit, or if not number one, they're at least top 5. And it's going to make it even tougher, right? Because I think we've seen Carolina's PK over the years. It's a very fun penalty kill to watch because they are pressuring high and they create turnovers. Not fun if you're the Bruins, who I think you look at what's been plaguing him throughout this slump they've had is holding on to the puck, being indecisive. For this, it's moving the puck quick. It's one where if you're decisive with it and you're able to move it around it in short order, there'll be open ice for a guy like Bergeron in the bumper or Pastrnak in his usual spot to bury those chances. But it's all about, I think, guys like McAvoy, Marchand up high, because there's going to be guys pressuring them throughout that time. That it's about moving the puck with some authority, knowing where to go with it. Easier said than done. Even the best laid plans usually, fall apart when you have a PK unit like Carolina, but you always feel like the Bruins are due, right? I don't think they're going to go into one of these games against Carolina where it's like game 3 against the Blues, right? Where they were 4 for 4 in the power play with 4 shots on goal. Don't think that, but
I forgot about that.
I think Craig Berube had enough, but it's still, you feel like they're due for at least some level of production there. And for them, it's the same with, breaking the puck out in the defensive zone. It's all about just being assertive with the puck and decisive with it, because if you're dilly-dallying around, this Carolina team will make you pay in a hurry.
Oh, yes. I'm also curious if the Bruins decide to go with Grzelcyk at the top of the key rather than McAvoy, just because he moves the puck a bit quicker. And he's a little more shifty at the top with Carolina's penalty. I'm curious if they do that. I feel like they won't, because McAvoy's been, solid 5-on-5 of late, but I don't think it's a terrible idea if that power play has a tough time in the first couple games of that series. Off the playoffs, let's do our 7th player award predictions. Now, this has already come out Thursday night.
Yes.
This
so it's going to be hilarious when we.
So we are going to predict what we think is going to happen. And when you're listening, it will have already happened. And you can compare our predictions to what actually took place. So, Conor, we did this a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Who is your pick for 7th player? Who do you think wins?
Who I think wins or who I think should win?
Who we think should win?
Should win? I think it should be Erik Haula. And I think it should be easy. I don't think it's, in terms of what he's brought to this team, in terms of how much they've changed that narrative for months this season. We talked about Tomas Hertl and Claude Giroux. And, this is something that as soon as Krejci announced that he wasn't coming back in July, we've talked about this countless times about what are they going to do at 2C, and whether it be Coyle, not, being probably the best fit on that line. Didn't really know what else was out there. Was it going to be Jack Sidnica? The fact that Erik Haula stepped in there seamlessly and elevated that whole line, and you've seen Taylor Hall hit a new gear, you've seen David Pastrnak still be productive. It's just, released such a great amount of tension in terms of what the Bruins were going to do. I feel like there was this other shoe to drop the entire season, not just for this year, but the anxiety of what happens next year, which we'll address that further down the line once maybe the postseason's done. But in terms of just the short term of this year, Haula and his fit there has been tremendous, and it's gone beyond what I think most people were expecting, especially when you look at just how he started the year, right? He had 1 goal, 3 points in the first 18 games to be at a point now where he's got, 41, 42 points at the stage of the season. Very impressive. And I was looking at the numbers yesterday after the Panthers game. I think Drew, since going to Florida, has, 22 points in 19 games. Very, very good. But I think Haula, during the same stretch since the deadline, I think he's up to 19 or 20 points in 19 games. So,
that's a great stat to tweet. That'll get the Bruins fans all riled up.
Yeah, I know. So we'll if he has a point tonight against Buffalo, then maybe I'll roll that tweet out. This will be like a prediction for a tweet that is like Inception. You just started that right now, and I've got that in my back pocket.
People can see how the tweets become.
Yes,
tweets.
Exactly. I write that down somewhere, but I think it should absolutely be Haula. I think he changed the maybe trajectory of the season is probably a little bit too much, but he has been a great find for the Bruins and made a lot of tough decisions, a lot of potentially costly trades irrelevant with the way he's played down the stretch here.
Should be Haula. I completely agree with you all on all of that. It absolutely should be Haula. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't, because it's all, the 7th player is all fan vote, right?
It is, yes.
So again, not to say Hall is unpopular, but he's not as dynamic a personality and as maybe a Jeremy Swayman is, who has the goalie hug, and he has all of that, and people like the goalie a bit more. And Jake DeBrusk wasn't on the ballot, right?
No, I don't think any there wasn't any like top 6 guys, I think. Now, Hall is a 2C, but I think people were like, all right, well, no one thought he was going to be a 2C, so we'll throw him on the ballot. So
so I don't think it'll be DeBrusk, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Swayman. I do think, though, it should be Holla, and I think it will be Holla, but it would not surprise me to see Swayman, just given like fans love the goalie hug. And I'm not saying that like they're not informed. I'm just saying like Swayman is just a little bit more popular. So, but again, Holla has been vital. I mean, you think back to like before January 1, when we were sitting here going like, what is this team going to be? Like, how are they going to figure this out? Taylor Hall's not producing. Craig Smith isn't producing. Holla isn't. All the signings in the offseason look terrible. And then Cassidy made that switch. Boom, and things have been smooth sailing kind of ever since. Anyways, 2 games left in the regular season. Well, really 1 after you listen to this. What can people look forward to over at BSJ?
Yeah, Evan, we're going to start our playoff previews. Obviously, most likely we'll be looking at a Carolina season preview, which I will say, if this episode could be friggin' hilarious in like a few days, if the Bruins win 2 in a row and Tampa loses 2, and this whole podcast is just irrelevant. But regardless of who the Bruins play, we'll have a full playoff preview coming out this weekend. Have all the daily coverage you expect from us once the playoffs do get started, with breakdowns, film review, all that good stuff. Still have a couple of features we're working on that we're hoping to kind of sprinkle throughout these playoff runs, which the longer the playoff run, the better in terms of more content. So we'll have all that stuff over at BSJ though. So subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. Want to follow me on Twitter for all my great stats, including that Eric Hollow one that maybe I'll tweet out later. You can follow me at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all of that. You're right. More playoffs is better for the podcast too, because we get to those fun summer days of when we're like, what are we going to talk about this week again? But anyways, Conor, always a pleasure. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You public radio listeners, have a great rest of your day.